Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about multi-cloud computing and data storage, specifically some of the data storage challenges in the complex world of multi-cloud computing. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone who knows a lot about the topic. With me is Robert Lee, Vice President and Chief Architect at Pure Storage. Rob, very good to have you with us today.
Very good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I think I would say Happy New Year to you today. I'm not sure. Can you still say Happy New Year on January 8th? Is there a protocol around that? I don't know. I'm going to say it anyways. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Likewise. Likewise.
So, I mean, obviously, the world of multi-cloud, that's not new technology. I mean, I read a report about a year ago. I think something like 60 or 70% of companies are now using multi-cloud, and it might even be something like 3.5 clouds per company on average. So it's, companies are deep into this approach at this point. But then there's the concept of storage, which seems more complex than the good old days of a single data center, even a single cloud deployment. I mean, what do you see as some of the potential challenges or very real challenges of data storage in the world of multi-cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's good to start with talking through why customers and why companies, are balancing on-premise, cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. And, quite frankly, for most customers, they are starting on-prem. So the first step really is just getting to the first public cloud, which is a hybrid cloud type of deployment.
Right.
And it turns out that hybrid and multi-cloud really present a lot of the same challenges. There's lots that we could go through, but I think the three that I would call out that really rise to the top are one, how to achieve portability. Right? How do companies avoid getting locked into one particular location or one particular cloud?
Right.
Number two is how to achieve some level of consistency, right? You don't get locked into one location or cloud, but how do you get to where you can use them more interchangeably without a separate set of runbooks or a separate software stack or a separate team to have to support you in each of these environments? And the number three that I'd call out is really cost control. How do companies avoid getting into this world of unpredictable spiraling costs? And I think part of this is really just coming down to, it comes down to not trying to live an on-prem lifestyle, when you move into the cloud. This is about balancing the need. The customers and companies really are looking to cloud to provide some of the agility, but that is a double-edged sword. That same agility that people are looking for, being able to get a service or infrastructure dialed up at the swipe of a credit card, also makes it easier to binge, right? And
Right.
so
Shadow
and so
IT.
this. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this problem rears its head when you move into your first cloud. It only compounds as you move across multiple clouds. And so I think those are the three challenges I'd call out that rise to the top: the portability, consistency, and maintaining cost control.
On the issue of portability, I'm curious to get your feelings on that. In that, it seems like I've heard some people say that portability is something of a myth, and that if you're onto a certain cloud provider and you have, say, a database there, or you have a machine learning deployment set up with that provider, the idea of suddenly moving that machine learning deployment or some other deployment off to another provider is so difficult. It's almost like, it's like portability is really difficult, which may relate to the world of data storage. But what is your sense of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're onto something here. What I would say is I would actually split portability. I think there's actually two separate pieces of this.
Okay.
One is, hey, I've got an application environment, machine learning data set in one cloud. Do I want to hop from cloud to cloud? And I completely agree with you, right? Cloud hopping, especially because of the data challenges, the cost challenges, the networking challenges, really doesn't happen that much.
Right.
On the other hand, cloud optionality is a real thing, right? So
Okay.
customers that want to have the option to deploy part of their workload, part of their environment in Cloud A, part in Cloud B, and they want to be able to have that flexibility. I'll give you a great example of this. If you look at a lot of the SaaS providers, that we serve here at Pure, these SaaS providers are providing, running services to host their customers. They're running them on some large public cloud environments. They might be built in AWS. They might have customers that refuse to store data in AWS because of competitive reasons.
Right.
And so these SaaS providers, just as a matter of a course of business, have to be able to operate their service in multiple cloud environments in order to serve their customers.
Right.
And so now this comes back to consistency. If you're a SaaS provider, if you want that optionality, how do you do that? How do you achieve that without having 2, 3 different software stacks, two,
Right.
3 different R&D teams, two,
Right.
three different support teams? And so I think I would agree with you. Cloud hopping doesn't really happen that much, but I think everybody wants cloud optionality.
Uh-huh. Which in theory would help with the pricing from the cloud provider. That's a separate issue, but you might be able,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, separate and linked, but it's a very real issue. Yep.
Uh-huh. So if you were to give a company some advice in terms of an optimal hardware setup or hardware and software setup, data storage setup for a multi-cloud environment, what would you say that they need? I mean, I'd like to get your overall best practices, but just in terms of the physical hardware and software, what sort of things does a company definitely need to optimize data storage for multi-cloud?
Absolutely. So I think even before you get started, the most important thing is to be proactive versus reactive. I
Mm-hmm.
think most companies that we see, a lot of our customers, I think these challenges tend to sneak up because oftentimes companies aren't thinking about designing for multi-cloud up front.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, it's a lot harder to make changes once an environment or an architecture is established or in place. So you really have to think about these challenges and design with this in mind up front. As far as addressing the particular challenges I called out, I think, when we think about portability or optionality, I think that's where making technology choices, very carefully is very important. For companies to, as they're building out these environments, making sure they're choosing portable technology stacks or infrastructure stacks, whether it's hardware, whether it's software, whether it's services, but choosing the right ones that to build on, so you don't have to redesign everything when you move across environments. And so part of that is making sure that the technology you're choosing is available and consistent across these environments, that you can deploy it in Cloud A, Cloud B on your own premise. But really, I think focusing on making those right choices up front before a ton of software gets written, before a ton of environment gets stood up. I think number
But is
two,
a real quick one on that, and then I don't want to interrupt too long. It's like
yeah,
the idea of some of that planning. It seems like in the real world, someone might say, well, we have our clouds and we have our deployments, and we've been doing this for 2 or 3 years even. Suddenly we realize, hey, Google, for example, has got this new AI product. We've got to get on board with that. We had no idea, but they're just really surging ahead in AI. Let's do that, even though we've been planning without them for the last 2 years. So that it seems like in the ever-changing cloud world, that plan is going to be really difficult to do.
um, yeah, no. So I think you're highlighting exactly one of the challenges there. How do you balance getting the most out of the offerings that might that might come out in this very fast-paced, rapidly developing part of technology?
Right.
How do you balance that against creating this consistency and portability? And I think there's a couple things that companies can do, a couple best practices here, right? So one is really choosing technology stacks that allow you to leverage the power of open source, right?
Mm.
If Google comes out with some new AI machine learning platform, that really is quite powerful, it's not going to take very long for the open source community to embrace that, to build applications, to build APIs or
Mm-hmm.
interfaces, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
on top of that. And
Right.
so, as a customer, as a company, what you should be looking for is, how do I make best use of the underlying cloud environments
Mm-hmm.
by leveraging the power of open source? How do I make it easy to deploy open source technology? Oftentimes, these pieces of software, microservices, if you will, oftentimes delivered through cloud native stacks, through container-based technologies. And so, really, again, this comes down to making your technology choices in a way that gives you maximal flexibility to leverage the best pieces. Um, the second point I would make is, as you're making these choices up front, and you're building not just the technology, but also the processes, it's super, super important to focus on automating everything, right, as much as
Mm.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
If you want something to be done consistently and repeatably, it turns out humans aren't that great at that. Computers
Right.
are, right? And
Right. Right. It's one of the
and
weaknesses of humans. They're good at some things, but consistency is not one of them.
Exactly. It's exactly. And so it turns out computers are actually just much better at that. And so the key to that really is focusing on automating everything.
Hmm.
And then, the third point I brought up is about cost control.
Yeah.
And really, there's two big pieces, I would suggest that we see as best practices there.
Hmm.
One is the more you automate, the easier it is to keep your costs in check, right? So the
Right.
reason that a lot of
Right.
companies run into cost overruns is they have a lot of manual ad hoc, somebody shadow IT somewhere orders up a service, nobody knows about it, and it's
Hmm.
just sitting there on a bill.
Right.
Um, if you automate everything, then it's tracked, it's logged, it's reported on, and so that gives you a lot more control, allows you to spend a lot more intentionally.
Hmm.
And the other part of cost control, I would link back to getting portability or optionality. Exactly the point you brought up. If you're a company, you're a customer and you build a technology stack that locks you into one cloud provider or one infrastructure stack, uh, it's a lot easier to get held hostage, right?
Right.
Once you show optionality, well, you have leverage, you have bargaining power, and that's where free market economics come into play.
Right.
And so that's really what we see as best practices along each of
Hmm.
those dimensions.
So you certainly talked about best practices. I want to make sure that if you did you leave any out, if someone said to you, "Hey Rob, I really want to make sure we've optimized this," are there a few bullet points? Is that most of them, or is any last best practice you'd want to add in there?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely most of them. What I would say is that oftentimes customers or companies will focus on trying to solve some of these issues for part of their estate, but not all of their environments.
Mm.
And I think one of the things I would call out is that we see companies really having to balance two challenges. A lot of companies, most of them aren't starting from scratch. They have existing traditional applications uh, that they want this flexibility, agility. They want the benefits of the cloud. They also have net new applications. So a lot
Mm.
of people focus on the greenfield, don't think about the traditional environments.
Right.
And so what I would say is that you need to, if you're starting out on this journey, you really need to think about meeting both of these sets of needs, right? Being able to get portability to the cloud across clouds, not just for your greenfield container-based applications, where certainly you get a lot of benefit, but also be able to serve your traditional environments as well.
You almost use the word legacy, which is kind of a dirty word these days. I'm glad you used the L word.
Well, I mean, it's to some degree semantics, but
Right. Right.
I think it really is a balancing act for companies because if you think about where most of their time and budget today is spent, it is in the traditional existing environments.
Right.
If you think about where a lot of their strategic initiatives in the future lie, it's in these net new applications. And so, to some degree, people need to serve both. And the other point I'd make is that we're very rapidly, in many cases we're moving to a world where these two sets of applications, the traditional environments, the net new, they aren't siloed. They work together, right?
Right.
Customers have been collecting data. They've been amassing data for decades. They're now looking to get better use out of these massive stores of data.
Mhm.
The way they do that is by leveraging cloud native technologies, modern application stacks, modern analytics.
Mhm.
And so you have to actually connect these two worlds, right? And so if you're trying to do this on-prem, you're trying to do this in the cloud, you're trying to do this across cloud, you need the same properties out of both of these types of environments.
Right. Right. Well, I think this question I want to ask is sort of an 8-hour answer, and that it's so open-ended you might never be able to really answer it, but I'll ask you anyways. What about the relationship between data management and data storage in multi-cloud or overall? I mean, is there an insight or two you'd add there? I know to really talk about the relationship, it could take literally all day, but in data management, data storage in the year 2021, what's your sort of nutshell thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely could be an 8-hour answer. I don't think
Right.
we have 8 hours on
No,
the video,
6 hours
but
maybe, but
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
So absolutely, we see data management and storage is very tightly related. Certainly, storage is the biggest piece of the puzzle, right? You got to start by having your primary storage. But once you have that in place, once you've kind of achieved the properties I've talked about, specifically around cloud.
Mhm.
You immediately start turning your attention to thinking about data management, right? Whether that's data protection,
Right.
whether that's meeting your organization's BCDR, business continuity or disaster recovery needs,
Mhm.
whether it's data security, whether it's even just by starting to, by understanding, what data you have and tracking where it sits, and
Mhm.
some of the issues we talked about in terms of cost control.
Right.
And so, the one area there that I'd really call out that we see, a lot of renewed focus on is around the data protection side of things.
Hmm.
I think historically, in the past, many people have focused on how quickly can you back up data, right? So I've got this
Right.
production environment. It's super
Right.
important to me. It's my trading environment, whatever it is.
Mhm.
How much can I get backed up overnight? How quickly can I get it backed up?
Right.
What we've definitely seen over the last several years is a renewed focus on, yeah, that's important, but actually more important is if something goes wrong, how quickly can I get it back?
Right.
And we see this in regulated environments. We see this in certainly with a rise of delivering services.
Mhm.
Service vendors have SLAs to their customers, right? So if
Right.
something goes wrong and they can't get it back within a period of time, financial penalties start kicking in. And
Could be
so
ransomware as well.
and then you hit on the third one, which is
Yeah.
ransomware, right?
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so with the rise of ransomware, um, and certainly we've seen very high profile incidents there across industries. Ransomware has definitely poured fuel in the flame of solving these problems. And this is
Right.
certainly where, we've invested tremendously in helping our customers navigate through this and really modernize a lot of their approaches to data protection.
Hmm. Interesting. The other thing, and I've heard you talk about this, I think it's a really neat point. It's, with the growth of multi-cloud, or certainly the rise of cloud native. I would even say that cloud native is probably a little ahead of multi-cloud, and that more companies have fully adopted multi-cloud. But there's a relationship there between object storage and cloud native. How do those two worlds relate to each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So, object storage, and as you pointed out, object storage and cloud native application stacks or architectures really do go hand in hand. Object storage, plays a huge role in modern applications. If we peel back the layers of the onion a little bit, this comes down to object is really uniquely well suited for these modern application environments, specifically the very data hungry types of applications. I think this comes down to really what the different types of storage were designed for. If you think about block storage, it's
Mm-hmm.
great for high performance data access to a single or very small number of applications. You've got an Oracle database, you've got a VM instance, you want just very, very low latency, block is great for that. If you think about file storage, it's very well suited for sharing data between humans and a small number of different applications, right? I've got a file environment. I want to run some, some applications, to process data, share them across those applications. File, is really well suited for that. When we think about object storage, it's really designed for sharing data, at massive scale across lots of compute, across lots of different types of applications.
Hmm.
And so it's just very well suited for the needs of modern data hungry types of software, but also the cloud infrastructure. And so I think you definitely see object storage rising in importance and adoption. We definitely see this becoming a new form of primary storage. And that has significant implications, right? For something to be primary storage in the enterprise, there's some table stakes, right? It's got to be fast, it's
Right.
got to be resilient, it's got to be
Right.
secure, you got to be able to protect it, all of the enterprise needs. And it's got to be consistent and available everywhere, right? So it's got to be available not just in the cloud, but on premise in your data center as well.
Right.
And so we definitely see these trends certainly emerging over the last several years because of cloud native stacks, but accelerating as we look forward.
Mhm. And I think you may have covered this, but what specifically, why specifically is cloud native more a better fit with object storage than say traditional, traditional applications?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the attributes that drives cloud native architectures is this idea that we are moving to a software world where environments are put together with lots of different application pieces, whether they're coming from open source, whether they're developed in-house, whether they're third party. But this idea of microservices, this idea of lots of
Right.
smaller applications working in tandem, in conjunction with one another to serve
Right.
business needs. Well, as soon as you go down that path, right, you're now in a world of having to share data, having to coordinate data across lots of these different applications to be able to, for each piece of the puzzle, if you will, to work
Yeah.
on the same data set. And so in order to do that, well, you need a couple of things. You need huge scale. You need lots of concurrency, lots of parallelism,
Hmm.
but you also need a safe way to share this data, right? If I've
Okay.
got lots of different applications trying to read the data, I need to be able to coordinate, make sure that it can't be overwritten, right, by some application over here as something over here is trying to work with it.
Right.
And so when you think about it at that level and get into really the weeds of how object storage works, it's just very well suited for ticking off, a kind of those attributes: high
Uh-huh.
performance, high
Okay.
scale, high shareability,
Okay.
and so that's a big piece of the puzzle there.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, last question, I'd like to sort of look ahead and look into your crystal ball. And if we have this conversation, 2, 3 years from now, and people are talking about data storage in the world of multi-cloud, is it going to be, oh no, that's simple now? How could that have ever been a problem or a challenge? Or is it going to be, oh gosh, it's getting harder all the time? It was a challenge, and now it's almost out of control. I mean, what do you see in terms of the future of multi-cloud and data storage, and or a pure storage product that might relate to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think on that spectrum, it's somewhere in between.
Okay.
I think certainly we're at the phase where companies are recognizing the challenge, the benefits of cloud and multi-cloud, but they're also starting to see the challenges inherent. And so I think, look, the industry doesn't move at the speed of light. It will
Right.
take some time for best practices to really cement and emerge. It will take time, for the requisite pieces of technology to support those best practices to really cement. Um, and so I think you see acceleration there. On the flip side, I think that I think that data movement storage is often the biggest challenge that customers face, and so I think it will take time for customers to really navigate through that. If I think about the future of multi-cloud in the context of pure storage,
Hmm.
I think we've got a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot ahead of us. Our
Hmm.
goal fundamentally here at Pure is really to help our customers, get to the cloud, get to hybrid cloud, get to multi-cloud, but also to bring a little bit of the cloud to them in their data centers. And what does that mean? Well, first and foremost, we start off by really giving customers Uber consolidation, right?
Hmm.
And what does that mean?
Hmm.
It's hard to solve a lot of these challenges I've laid out if you've got lots and lots of silos of different infrastructure. If you've got,
Right.
a different product for every need. This is where the legacy part of the storage market, and that's, I've used the L word now. This is
Thank you.
where the legacy part of the industry has evolved to.
Right.
But we've really focused on, and we're able to meet our customers' needs on top of 3 core platforms.
Hmm.
Our what we call our Flash Array, our Flash Blade, now with Portworx
Hmm.
acquisition.
Right.
Secondly, we do this by, we help bridge these environments for our customers by providing our software solutions that work exactly the same. It's the same software that runs on-premise, in the cloud, across clouds. And we
Hmm.
do this by focusing on both traditional application needs and their greenfield, modern, cloud-native applications.
Hmm.
And then 3, to bring a little bit of the cloud back to their data centers, we provide a lot of the cloud-like simplicity and management that they're used to in the public cloud environments back on premise. Bring that operational model to the data center, delivering storage to applications and developers in exactly the same way that a cloud service is meant to be consumed, completely automatable and automated, natively integrated and API driven, and delivered and connected across a wide variety of these hardware environments on premise and cloud.
Mhm.
And so look, I think the future, is really about continuing to help our customers get flexibility across these environments. We've made great strides over the last several years, but definitely a lot more opportunity ahead of us and a lot more to do.
Great. Rob, I think you said it. I very much appreciate you sharing your expertise today. I learned something. Thank you very much.
Thank you.